Smeared faces, Lord, they hate to hear your message. Though I'm geared with your protection, your armor that I've been blessed with, no stressing. When I'm trying to teach them all your lessons, they looking at me crazy like I got a weird perspective. Smeared faces, Lord, they hate to hear your message. Though I'm geared with your protection, your armor that I've been blessed with, no stressing. When I'm trying to teach them all your lessons, they looking at me crazy like I got a weird perspective.
Yo, welcome to another episode of the Weird Perspective Podcast. My name is Darry, joined with my amazing co-host, Mr. Raymond Woods. Thank y'all for joining us today. Hey, Ray, what we gonna be talking about?
Today, we are talking about a subject that you and I have a lot of experience in. That is premarital counseling. A very sexy topic for two young married men to discuss. Premarital counseling. So, yes, I'm excited about this just because when we discussed talking about this subject, this was something I felt very confident about approaching because I had about 6 months of intense actual experience with my fiance, who is now my wife. And we had premarital counseling before we got engaged, and then premarital counseling after we got engaged, from two completely different angles. And I'm really excited to discuss this topic.
Yeah, I'm super excited too, man. I think premarital counseling, like in today's world, I don't know if people value it in the way that they should. I think back in the day, I don't think a lot of people got premarital counseling because I don't think that it was so many things, so many differences of people coming together. A lot of people came together. They were from the same circles, or even their families knew each other. So they had a lot of the same values. But in today's world, man, you got to get some premarital counseling because you got to go in and you got to be able to talk about the hard differences, the hard truths, and learn how to deal with conflict in your marriage. And so we're going to talk about that today, man. I did a lot of research and I found out that a lot of married couples, right, a lot of people get married, surprisingly, more for other reasons outside of love and companionship. Can you guess what some of those things are? Some reasons why people would get married other than love and companionship.
Other than love and companionship, I mean, I'm married to a woman of Indian descent, so I can just say arranged marriage. So it just may be two sets of parents thought you guys were a good match. And then just to keep the family name, keep things status quo, they got a young man and a young woman together. That's one. Mm-hmm. A lot of times it's along a similar line of thinking. It could just be like, it just makes sense for us to be together. Like the love may not be there, and other things may not be there, but we just make sense. We come from the same social circle. We make the same amount of money. So it's more of like a deal. And then honestly, if it's not love or what?
Companionship.
If it's not love or companionship, I would say loneliness, but I think that is kind of solved by companionship. But I think there's a kind of loneliness because companionship, there's a lot of self-sacrifice with that, with companionship. Because I think like healthy, mature companionship involves you knowing that it's not one-sided. But I think there's a kind of loneliness. I would say maybe the third one is loneliness because that can be, depending on how you approach it, really self-centered. So I would think just bottom flatline loneliness. And that can cause you to compromise, maybe on a lot of standards that you wouldn't compromise if you're looking at companionship from a healthier point of view. So
Yeah. So the top other 4 answers that I found as far as why people get married other than love and companionship, the number 1 following that was money. That cheddar cheese, being comfortable, stability, right? The finer things in life, whatever it is, men and women both marry for money. That's a big one, right? I hear a lot of dudes talk about, man, she needs to bring something to the table. I ain't paying all the bills. We got to split 50-50. It's a whole nother podcast that we can dive into.
That's a whole nother podcast.
The
Dear Lord.
second one is or the next one is citizenship. Now I was surprised when I found this one, citizenship. I know some people who got married for to get the their papers, but I didn't know that it was so high up on the list. And then after that was family pressure. So they're getting
Hmm.
into the 30s. Parents are like, look, man, I want some grandbabies. I want you've been single long enough. Like let's get it on. So family pressure. You need to have kids. You need to be married. You're gonna miss your window. All that type of stuff. So those were the top ones outside of love of why people get married.
Hmm.
Pretty pretty
That's interesting.
pretty interesting things, right? And so we're gonna be talking about some premarital counseling. And so premarital counseling, it's therapy, right, to assist couples in preparing for a long, healthy marriage. Premarital counseling is the type of counseling that helps people learn how to communicate, that helps people learn how to deal with conflict, and you want to be able to, before you say I do, have some real tough conversations. So when you do finally get to that point, you've already talked about it because it's going to come up. It's not about if, but it's about when, right? You
Hmm.
go through seasons of where you and your spouse are always going to be changing. So premarital counseling helps to learn how to deal with those situations, and so from a Christian perspective, I highly encourage, if you're a Christian, to sit down with a pastor, um, I would say a couple, right, pastor and his wife, and talk about these things
True.
like children, right? You gonna whoop them? How your discipline gonna be, right? You need to sit down and talk about whether you conservative or liberal, because that is like a hot topic. I know some married couples that actually got divorced over politics. It's crazy. It's wild out here.
Man.
Number one, what is your beliefs, right? This should just be the first thing, because as Christians, we shouldn't be unequally yoked with anybody. So if they're not a Christian, then you shouldn't be dating them, right? We shouldn't. I don't know how this is going to work. What foundation are you living on? I'm living my foundation on Christ. You living yours on Muhammad
Amen.
or Buddha. Like how this gonna work? You know what I'm saying? And so we got to make real decisions. When I say come together and we pray, and we doing these things according to the Bible, I'm pulling out the Bible. You pulling out the Quran or whatever it is. Like
Or you pulling out the crystals, you pulling out the
yeah,
sage,
some
you're gonna pull
sage,
out,
lighting incense, and all that stuff. Like these are real things that we need to be able to talk about, and to be able to even say if we're gonna make it to marriage, right? Is this relationship healthy enough? Is the foundation strong enough for us even to pursue marriage? So I think premarital counseling is critical. It's critical, especially in today's times, man. What do you think?
So you look at the kick to the tires analogy, but you said something really interesting. I believe marital counseling is of the utmost importance. And I'll use a quick example because some people may think, especially Christians, and I want to speak to this specifically, that just if you have Jesus in common, that's the end all be all. But there are like, even amongst believers, there are many different types and styles of how you pray. Like what scriptures do you go to? Like you have some Christians who are more charismatic, some Christians who are more conservative. You have some Christians who um don't believe in tithing. Some Christians believe in tithing. Me and my wife, one thing that was very interesting is I would describe myself as a little bit more in my faith charismatic, and I would define my wife as a little bit more pragmatic or a little bit more conservative. And this is by no means meant to like be a exact definition of how we practice our faith, but that's something we noticed early on. And this is why I was glad for marital counseling. And this is why I was glad for the other couples who walked alongside us as we walked towards marriage, is because we got to see modeled how how even amongst believers, how different styles of believers could be married and come together and walk their faith out. We saw this specifically in a couple that we were kind of looking to and that we're kind of we would kind of have them. We would ask questions and we would inquire of them because the guy was kind of like he kind of mirrored my wife and how he practiced his faith, and the woman kind of mirrored me and how she practiced her faith. But they were such a brilliant like couple together, and just seeing how they practiced that gave us just a lot of just hope. Like we can do this. So I mean, so to the believers out there specifically, who may be thinking, well, we just have Jesus in common. We don't need marriage counseling. We don't need to sit up under other couples to see how you probably need it more. I think because just because you think you have Jesus in common doesn't mean you won't need to find out how to connect, on other issues.
Yeah,
I just want to touch on that first. I have my list of pros about why marriage counseling is important, but that's something specifically I wanted to talk to because I think a lot of Christians let themselves off the hook.
yeah,
Oh, we just have Jesus in common. That's it. No, there's more to it, than that.
yeah. We definitely gonna get into the benefits of premarital counseling and why it's important, why you should get it, Christian or not. It might be a Christian listening, a non-Christian listening to this. Listen, everybody should
Yes.
get it, Christian or non-Christian, whatever your belief system is. You need premarital counseling, and there's some essentials that we're gonna get into, the reasons why. And so, but before that, want to just continue to talk about some things and like go over what we've been seeing, right? And so I've seen a lot of couples, man, get divorced, especially during the time of COVID. And it was very interesting to me that a lot of couples would get divorced over COVID. You would think like that couples would, we locked in this room together or this house, like we gonna get closer, right? We're gonna be able to spend more time together and be able to, you know, be intimate and all the stuff, watch movies, hang out, play games, whatever it is. We was gonna be able to be closer. Like COVID should have brought couples closer. But what happened was, I think a lot of couples that did not have uh, any type of premarital counseling, or they might have gotten together just for one of those reasons that we talked about, whether it was like family pressure or for the money or for whatever it was, COVID hit, those things got shaky. Foundation that they based their marriage on was rocked. And
Hmm.
things started to fall apart. And so you've seen people start to get divorced. You've seen things start to unravel, right? They couldn't be in the same room with each other for long periods of time without bumping heads, right? And so where the healthy couples, they came together, they got stronger, things were good. But with the couples with the rocky foundation, COVID hit. Now we locked in this room. My job is like thinking about. I heard this one guy say he like, man, he spends 10, 12 hours a day at work. So when he comes home, it's like dinner, a quick little convo, and then it's bedtime. He don't really have to engage with his wife like that. But now COVID comes, and now he's forced to be in the house with her all day, right? Um, Now you got to deal with certain things that you were trying to avoid, and if you don't know how to deal with those things in a healthy manner, now it's conflict, and now it's just like, you know what? I'm out of here. Like I ain't signed up for this. And so that's just some examples of like what I had seen and what I noticed with people who didn't have like premarital counseling or who didn't take premarital counseling serious, because premarital counseling isn't like this is what's gonna, you're never gonna get a divorce. That's not true. Like I got stats and we're gonna get into those to prove that, right? Um, but here are some stats as far as marriage goes, and there's 40 to 50% of marriages end in divorce. This is as of 2022.
Hmm.
That's the first marriage. People who get married a second time, 60 to 67% of second marriages end in divorce. So some people think like, well, I've been divorced
Dear
once,
Lord.
I know what to do better. It's gonna be easier. No, they got a higher
Hmm.
divorce rate. Now that's crazy.
I'm
Now,
not. I'm not shocked by that. I'm not. I mean, real quick, like if you, it's sort of like when you hear about church hurt, or when you hear about this. Just popped into my mind when you said that. It's like if somebody does something at a church that offends you, and sometimes it's legitimate, sometimes you got to get out of a scary situation. But if it's like, I don't like the way they did this one thing, so I'm going to bounce and I'm going to go to a church that accepts me, and then you go to a different church and then the same thing happens
You go
because
fat.
you didn't deal with that. You didn't deal with that issue. So I'm actually less shocked at the second statistic, than at the first one. The first statistic is sad. The second one is not that surprising. You
Mm,
know,
yeah, yeah. And so, um, another quick stat, really quick, is Christians who attend church regularly have a divorce rate of 38%. This is a Christian stat. Christians who go to church regularly, they're faithful, they're plugged into a local church. 38%. Now that's still, for me as a Christian, it's still kind of high, but it's lower than the norm, right? And so that's better. Um, but man, what do you when you hear these stats? What do you think about? What pops in your head? How
the
do you
one
respond to
stat,
those?
the first stat that 38% of couples that attend church regularly, the divorce rate is lower. That screams to me community. If you're in community, there's I don't want to hop ahead to the scriptures I have, because I have some scriptures we could look at, but being in community, I know for me and my wife, the church we attend, the, the teaching we sit up under is sound. There's that. The service they do in the community is wonderful. But we get to see couples from like age 70 down to like 21 who are married.
Mm.
And we just get to see that. And we get to be around couples who have been through, we've heard their testimonies, they've been through stuff we cannot even fathom, or just like real life stuff. And I just think being in that environment, being around consistency, I think is good for your union. So when I hear that if you go to church like consistently, yeah, you're up under the word. That's always going to minister to your union. But you get to see other couples walking it out. It's just seeing it.
Yeah.
I think that's encouraging.
Yeah, excuse me. I had one more stat that I missed, and that is 30% of marriages that do premarital counseling and take it serious, there is a 30% better success rate and have a more successful, healthier marriage when they do premarital counseling and they take it serious, and they practice those things long term. Those marriages are 30% more successful than people who don't. So it works. It works. When you practice these
True.
things, it
Yes, sir.
works. And so I want to hear what verses you have on this thing, premarital. I want to hear it.
Well, I can't use. I had one that was super good, but I used it last week. But I got a good 1-2 punch for you. This is one that's pretty near and dear to my heart. It's Proverbs 15:22,
Mm,
and it goes, "Without counsel, plans go awry,
mm,
but in the multitude of counselors, they are established." So one more time: without counselors, plans go awry, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. So that's one. The second one I have is 1 Corinthians 11 verse 1, and these kind of echo each other. But this is Paul addressing the Corinthian church. They was wilding out and everything like that. But before he kind of gives a lot of instruction, because anyone who knows anything about Corinthians, he gave you instructions on, it seems like, how to, you know, clean your eye, because it seemed like they couldn't do nothing right. So this is how you get up out of bed. This is how you do this. But he said something that was really interesting. He said, "Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ." So one more
mm.
time, follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. And I'll speak to the second one first, just real quickly. We had so many couples throughout our marriage counseling journey that we were able to follow their example. And I mean, I'll get into the nuts and bolts of the different kind of counseling that we have, but that was kind of key to us. Like they would they would kind of pair us with different couples. week to week. I'll break this down a little bit later, but we got to just kind of walk with different couples as they discuss finances, sex, intimacy, date nights, child rearing, and we got to basically follow their example as they were following Jesus. So those two verses really, really spoke to me.
Nice, nice, nice. Um, so as I was doing this study and preparing for this topic, and I was looking up verses, first I want to just say that there is no command for anybody to get premarital counseling. I think the verse that you just said was the best verse, the same verse that I had. And I didn't even know that because we didn't even talk about what verses we had before we came together. So, but there is no like God says get premarital counseling, right? Always seeking out wise counsel is best.
True.
And so there might not be a command or a verse like that says to get premarital counseling, but there are principles in the Bible that we see throughout the entire Bible for not just like premarital counseling, but just counsel, period. I think when the Bible talks about counsel, talks about wise counsel, that's for whatever situation you're going through. If you having some financial struggles, go talk to somebody in the church that is a good steward
Yes, sir.
over their resources, so they can get you on a budget and they can help you out, and then you can overcome this thing, right? A basic principle, tithing is a basic principle because it teaches you discipline. It's to give God His 10 and be faithful with this 90. I got to make this 90 stretch. I got to be wise with this 90% that I got. So stuff like that. But the one verse that I did want to talk about, and it's a long section. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's Ephesians chapter 5, verses 22 all the way down to 33. Now, like I said, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the very first verse just really makes you think, right? Verse 22 says, "Wives, submit to your husband as to the Lord." And then my question is, how can you submit to the Lord, or submit to it says submit to your husband as to the Lord? Who is the Lord to you? This is for Christians I'm speaking to. You it's a principle because you have to be able to understand that you're submitting to the Lord. Right? I'm submitting to my husband as I submit to the Lord. Why? Where does that come from? When we talk about premarital counseling, what's the foundation of your life? It's the Lord. You got to have this tough conversation with this woman or your spouse to be able to even know what is their foundation. Going back to what I mentioned in the beginning is that you got to have these tough conversations. That's why I don't believe like if you're a Christian, you shouldn't be dating a Muslim or Jehovah's Witness or anybody else that their foundation isn't Jesus Christ, the real Jesus Christ, not the one the Quran talks about, or a couple other little cults and stuff like that, like the Jesus Christ of the Bible. If your foundation is not in Him, then as soon as things start getting rocky, then you're gonna lean onto whatever your foundation is, and that foundation is easily going to be crumbled, right? If it's money, when you lose your job, here goes you freaking out about money, how to pay the bills, and that's all you depended on. So when that's gone from you, here comes anxiety, here comes depression, and here comes, I'm going to go and find the next man or the next woman that can pay my bills. So it starts with the foundation of how we live our lives. What are we building our house on? And that's important. And I think that's where it starts. And I just piggybacked off that verse because it talks about, and it goes into more detail. It talks about husbands loving your wife as Christ loves the church.
Love the church.
How you gonna love your wife as Christ loved the church if you don't know who Christ is? Again, having a relationship with Jesus Christ, understanding how He loved the church. These are foundation principles that we should be building our lives on. And so you can't do that if you don't know, right? And the woman ain't gonna understand what this Bible was talking about when it says submit to her husband. She gonna be like, "What you talking about, man? Like, I'm an independent woman. You heard Beyonce's song and Destiny's Child. Like, what you talking about? Like, but again, you need to be with somebody that you're equally yoked with, right?
Equally yoked,
Be
as the old
equally
timers
yoked.
say. But that's from scripture anyway.
Yeah, yeah. And so I just think that that's just such a important thing. I've been around so many single people, and they're dating this person, they're dating this person. Now, my first question is always, are they a believer?
Here is a reminder from Mary. Oh, sorry about that. My Alexa was going. My
Alexa.
wait. Now listen. This is called teamwork. My beautiful wife set an alarm on my Alexa so I can remember not to park my car on the street. So this
Oh,
this is what we learned in marital counseling. I had that set up on purpose because we learned in marital counseling teamwork. Because she was tired of me getting parking tickets.
yeah.
So there you go. In
That's
real time.
good. That's good though. That's good. And so, yeah, man, the principles and it's your foundation. What do you build your foundation on? And I want to talk about really quick, unless you got something else you want to add to this section, um, of what this looked like for me personally, for me and my wife. I want to share my story. Uh,
Break it down. I want to hear it.
so for me and my wife, when we first got together, um, I mean, I grew up in the church. My wife, she had like Christian relatives, and her grandmother and her aunt on her mom's side were like the Christians in the families. But she didn't have. She was raised by her dad, so she didn't go to church or anything like that. I rebelled at like 16, and then I wound up getting saved when I was. It was this 2011, so I was whatever I was, 24, I think. Anyway, um, I got saved first, and then I went back to my wife, and I was like, "I'm saved now. I'm living for Jesus. We ain't doing nothing." Right? My wife was like, "Wait a minute." I ain't signed up for this, but we wasn't married at the time, right? So we was shacking up. We had 2 kids, right? We just had our second daughter, and it was a whole thing. Um, our foundation had already, as far as our relationship, had already been structured on nothing. It was just chaos, right? We met when we were sophomores in high school, and we've been together ever since. But we didn't have any of this training, so now we get saved. I get saved, and my wife gets saved. That was a whole journey, a whole process. Me having to understand that I can't just force my wife to be a Christian and to go to church or any of these things. How do I do that as a husband? How do I lead my family? My wife is still like up in the air. She don't know, right? Praise the Lord, it all worked out in the end. But in the beginning,
Amen.
it was real rough. And so we get pregnant with our third daughter. Um, we're in the church, but we're still not married. And so I'm like, man, we need to do this right. So I had proposed back in Ohio before I got saved. Now I am saved. I'm like, I want to make her an honest woman before God and all that stuff. So we had this one couple, shout outs to Tasha and Phil, who were very, very intentional, very direct with us as far as marriage, what it looks like, the whole nine. Phil was real intentional with me as far as what is a husband supposed to do, right? He asked me some real key questions like, do I love her? Would I die for her? And I was like, would I die for her? Like, what you mean? And it was a whole thing. It was part of my discipleship journey. So we had those conversations. We had with our spiritual mentors, and then we took a class called Growing Kids God's Way, which was a foundation of how we raise our kids. Which marriage is part of that, right? And so we had our marriage, and then we had a foundation of our family and what that looks like. But these two things were really critical in our lives, and so still in the process of going through that, we took another class and we read this book called Love and Respect. And then we took another marriage class with a whole bunch of other people, and it was called Sex, Love, and Communication. And then after that, we took another marriage class. It was called Indestructible Marriage. And so we were taking these things um, like every few months we were in a new marriage series. with other couples, other, marriage couples that were going through the things and all that stuff. So these things were very key for us. I don't think we would still be married today if we didn't go through those classes and get that understanding and get those teachings on how to do stuff. I didn't make it perfect, right? But we were able to overcome a lot of the stuff because the foundation and the things that we learned in those classes have been set. And so for us, I mean, like again, premarital counseling is critical, right? So whether it's sitting down, going through week by week with a pastor or his wife or whatever, or taking some really good marriage classes, like being real intentional, because it's kind of easy to get lost in the sauce depending on how big the class is, and you lose that one-on-one and being transparent and stuff like that. But I would say do everything. And if you could take a class like Growing Kids God's Way, which is like a college, it's like a college curriculum, dude. This was like a 6 month class, really long.
Dang.
If you could take a class like that, because it goes through marriage, and it goes through um, like why you're training your kids up to in the way that you're going to be training them up, why it's important. Talks about the important role of a father and a mother, the whole thing. It's amazing. So I would say if you could do something like that, do it, right? And do it before you have kids, or while your wife is pregnant, or while y'all trying to have kids. But just to start being intentional with the foundation of your household, your family, and how you want to raise. The more information you have, the better. And then if you have a community around you that can help you in these areas, because some of these areas I struggle in, even to this day, I'm not perfect. Like I still struggle with certain things, certain bad habits that I picked up, just as a young man up until now. I got to unlearn those things. But these things were key for me in my marriage. Those were the first four things that really helped us and gave us a lot of perspective on marriage and what marriage is and how do we do this the way that God would have us to do it. It was those things. So yeah, Tasha and Phil, Growing Kids God's Way class, the Love and Respect book. I know some people are like, they have their issues with it, but a lot of the stuff in there is really good. Like 90% of that book I stand on. Sex, love, and
Right.
communication. I don't think enough people. We got to take sex back and redeem sex for the Lord because the world is twisting it up and
Amen.
sex is looked at as like something that's disgusting or wrong. And it's like, yo, this is a gift from the Lord, and the Lord only gives good gifts. So I don't know what you're talking about, but as long as I do this in the right way, hey, I'm making it happen. But and then
Amen.
indestructible marriage.
Preach.
It's a lot of things in that class as well, and all these things you can buy, look them up online right now. Buy the curriculum, buy the DVDs. Jimmy Evans, that's his ministry. He does a lot of these teachings. So I would say get it, buy it, invest in your marriage, just like we invest in our health and we invest in our businesses and all that stuff. Invest in your marriage, man. Spend the money and spend the time reading and studying up on that. I got a whole bunch of books over here. A lot of them I haven't even read yet, but I got books over here on marriage, on fatherhood, and all that stuff. So these things are critical as we continue to. It's not like a once you do it one time, then that's it. You need to stop. Like it's forever. Counsel. You don't only go to counseling in the bad times. Like take these classes as refreshers and to learn new things. And you're in a new season now. Um, you're gonna need to know how to serve you. Your wife might have been one way before, when you guys first got married, but now she got kids, and now y'all have kids, and
Mm.
now things are changing, and she ain't got all the time and energy like she once had before. And so having to balance that out, and then us men having to learn how to be patient and meeting our wives where they're at when they're struggling or when they're going through things, and the bodies are changing, hormones, minds changing, all that stuff, man. It's a reality. It's real. And I think like
Mm.
these are the things that when we take premarital counseling, we should be talking about. Understanding like your wife ain't gonna be like pliggity plow all the time. You know what I'm saying? Eyebrows and the makeup, all that stuff ain't gonna be on fleek all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like especially when you
Mhm.
start having kids, because Y'all gotta attend to the kids. It's just a whole nother level. Men have to understand that the women's bodies change when they have kids. It actually takes a woman a whole year to recover from pregnancy, not 6 weeks like we think.
Dang.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah. So
TV has lied to me, man. Dang.
yeah, so I mean the 6 weeks you can start like having
I,
sex
I did I
again.
did I didn't know
But
that.
her body is not
That's what I
100%
heard.
healed from pregnancy for adding 6 weeks. No. It takes a whole year. Yeah. So she's still going. Then you got postpartum depression that could set in. You got all these other effects that come with having a kid. And so, man, I got 5, so I've literally lived it. I'm still living it. My wife is still going through the things. We've lost children. So having to deal with the mental battle of that. You know what I'm saying? Holding this baby for X amount of time and then losing it. It's a lot, man. And I mean to go on this rabbit trail and take up all this time and me
No,
blabbering.
it's all good.
But
It's all good.
but I just think like as men, as we're called to be the leaders, man, we gotta really get this thing together. Because Tony Evans says one thing in his book Kingdom Men that it was like a punch in my face when I read it. And he said that it might have not been your fault. Like you might have didn't cause these issues. You might have didn't cause the pain or the hurt. But as the husband, as the father, as the man, it's your responsibility to fix it. And I was like, oh, like what? Like that was heavy for me to hear that. Because the God gave us the authority, he gave us the dominion, he told us to rule over our household. Not in a belittling way, like we're gonna be belittling our wives and nothing like that, but we're called to hold them up. We're called to cover them, right? Spiritually, we're called to speak blessings over our wives. We're called to do all that stuff. And so it might have not been our fault from the things that they dealt with in their past, and now they're bringing those things into the marriage. But man, it's our responsibility to help them deal with that in a righteous way, right? In a biblical way. We have to lead that out. And so, yeah.
That's good. I was going to ask, is there I think sometimes when people think about marriage counseling, they think it's all theoretical and it's nothing that you can use in the day to day. I was going to ask, and I want to just make this a quick point, but is there something that you use regularly, like a tactic or a technique that you learned in marriage counseling that you could just like share really?
So well, I learned a lot of things, but the things that we practice that I try to practice every day is couch time. So what couch time is when you get home from work or your wife gets home from work, whenever y'all get home, whether y'all have kids or not, is to set aside a time, whether it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, of where it's just no phones, it's just you and her talking about whatever it is that y'all want to talk about. It's like, hey, honey, how's your day? And then let her vent. If she needs to talk the whole time that y'all on that couch, you let her do it. If it's a tough conversation that y'all need to have. But just being like, I ain't on my phone, even like, and so in my case, we have to tell the kids to, y'all play, but this is mommy and daddy's time. Don't interrupt us. This is our time, and we're gonna be talking. Now they could be around, unless y'all talking about something that's really private, but it's a time where the kids need to see you and mom having healthy conversation, healthy dialogue. Kids need to see that.
I like that.
And so it's not like, hey, we need to go in the room and close the door and then have the conversation. No, the kids need to see y'all talk. They need to see y'all kiss. They need to see y'all hug, right? Kids need to see that. Otherwise, they don't know what a healthy marriage like looks like. So
Mm.
that's like one of the things that you could even as you're dating, right? When you guys on the phone or whatever, some people are already shacking up and they live together now. Like start couch time. That's what it's called. Shout out to Randy and Kathy because they're the ones that taught me and my wife that. There were another couple been married. I don't know how long they've been married. I think they've been married like 40 years. They have an amazing family. Their kids are doing wonderful things. They're just a blessing to be able to just soak up so much game, and they're so patient. They're so patient with us, man. And so they make themselves available. And now, right now, they out there living their best life. So, shout outs to Randy and Kathy, man. I'm trying to be like y'all when I get older.
No doubt, no doubt. Yeah, I can make it quick too. Me and my wife married about a year and 3 months, and it's been a wonderful year and 3 months. We had 2 rounds of marriage counseling. The first happened before we got engaged, but when we were really getting serious, and the second happened leading up to the wedding. And the reason why we started marriage counseling at first is because we like reached a fork in the road in our relationship
Mm.
where we just started asking really hard questions. We had kind of showed, or at least I know I had showed like an ugly side. And then we started like having like a lot of questions about, okay, who is this person that I'm thinking about building a future with, having kids with, paying bills with, and doing like we have a lot of fun, but like what is the foundation of this person? And around that time, we were still going to separate churches. Marianne was still living a little village. I was in Forest Park already, and I was looking for a church home, but I was still connected to my old church. And I was tripping. Like I mean, I can go. This is part of my whole testimony, but I was tripping. And I called up my old church, and just they had a counseling department there. And I was talking with some of the counselors, and they recommended marriage counseling.
Mm.
And I'm like, hold up, marriage counseling is for people who are about to get married. Me and Marianne were like, we're kicking that around, but it's not like we're seriously thinking of that. But they was like, no, we actually recommend marriage counseling now, right as you're getting serious. In fact, we don't really even call it marriage counseling; we just call it couples counseling. The actual name of the program was called Entwine.
Mm.
And I still recommend it to this day. It's through Christian Life Center in Tinley Park. Now, what's funny is that once they recommended marriage counseling to me, I call up Marianne and she's like, Ray, I think before I even tell her that, she's like, Ray, I think we should do marriage counseling. Because I was talking to my old church and they recommended that we do it. And even though we're not that serious yet. So, I mean, God knew. So he was positioning us and everything. So the first round of marriage counseling we had was through my church. And it was literally this. It was for 6 weeks. And I think about 2 times a week, we would get together with a different couple, black, white, young, old brackets, and they would walk us through finances. They would walk us through. They would walk us through how to fight well. I remember like some of the best advice I got on marriage was, it's not marriage is not about like not ever having to fight. It's about learning how to fight well and how to fight properly and how to fight fairly. And at the end of the day how to realize you're fighting together against the enemy. You're not fighting each other. So finances, fighting, sex, intimacy, date nights, raising kids. And it would now this is during COVID, so it would be Marianne sitting next to me and we're looking into the camera and the other couple is looking back at us, and we're just talking, we're just shooting breeze. And like I said at the beginning, man, and the multitude of counselors, your plans are established. And that just one thing I first started learning from that, which is I guess if you're going to be like the man in a relationship is key, is sanctification and sacrifice. But I'll stick to that word sanctification because that's something that I think I knew of, but I didn't know what it meant until I started like thinking seriously about marriage. And you spoke about Tony Evans, and Tony Evans like has some great teaching on marriage. But honestly, I think the best teaching I've ever encountered on marriage, and it was something we had to watch in our first marriage counseling course, and it was called "Upset the Vows" by Tim Ross. Now, me and Darry, we're youngins in the podcasting game, but Tim Ross has got, anyone familiar in the Christian podcast space knows Unfiltered. And but before he was a podcast host, Tim Ross I mean, I guess he still is a pastor, but he was a pastor of this church, and he did a 9-week series on marriage and relationships, and it's revolutionary. It's revolutionary. Anyone considering marriage sometimes, or when I run into someone who just got engaged, I'm like, yo, watch at least the first episode of Upset the Vows, because that's when the seeds of what sanctification is first started being kind of sold in my heart. And that's when I mean, if Marianne can tell her side of the story too, I mean, we will have our wives on here, God willing, one day, but that's when I first started learning like what it means to sacrifice for your wife, what it means to enter into a marriage relationship, and you enter into that relationship with the knowledge that you will be changed, that God will use that relationship fashion you and to change you. And Darry, that's why I asked you, like, what are some things from marriage counseling that you carry with you to this day? And that's one thing I carry with me is sanctification. And like, when I don't want this to turn into like a scared straight on marriage thing, because marriage is beautiful. You got a lot of couples out there, even Christian couples, who are like, it's the fiery crucible of life. You will walk through, y'all will butt heads. Y'all is American gladiators. And I'm like, oh, okay, chill. Like, look, I have more fun with my wife. On the real, I have fun. My wife is my road dog, my companion, we pray together, and it's just nice just being with her, being in her presence. But there are the challenges, there are the trials. Even Jesus said that if you want to live in this world and live a godly life, you will face trials, and God can and will use those trials to fashion you, especially relationships.
Yeah.
And when I've encountered hard times in marriage, or when I've encountered difficult times, the teaching that I've had has allowed me to kind of take a step back and say, you know what, this is painful. This is emotionally painful. This is mentally taxing. But I know that this is just sanctifying. I'm not, honestly, it's like that whole everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. The Mike Tyson quote. I really think that marriage kind of taught me what to do once you get punched in the face. Don't let it throw you off. I'm not talking that like Marianne is punching me in the face and I'm getting abused. But what I mean is that like
Ray,
when a
do we need to
situation
talk after
arises,
this?
no, we don't need to talk. What's funny? Like Marianne did say she has never gotten. The one thing Marianne has said that I haven't completely believed is that Marianne said she never has gotten into a fight. I'm like, okay, you know, I, she no, I mean, I like she's a very sweet woman, but I'm like, for real, you ain't never thrown hands with anybody. She's like, Ray, I've never gotten into a fight, so I just don't want to be the first one, because
He
I've
said, I don't
seen
want to be the
some.
first.
I don't want to be the first one,
That's a good goal to have.
but
That's a
yeah,
good goal to have.
but yeah, just I keep such a good perspective when we have disagreements, when we can get on each other's nerves, because I know that it's just me. It's just God using that situation to teach me how to be less selfish, to teach me how to be like less self centered.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't realize how self centered, how much self centeredness was trying to stick in my heart until I got married and somebody had to share my space. Well, it's not your space anymore. It's
Yep.
not always the shows you want to watch. Oh, I'm sorry. I know I'm on my soapbox, but I just learned how to. It's that sanctifying.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
I think what you said that's a really good word. The sanctification process, like marriage. When you take it serious and you really do it the way God tells us to do it, it makes us holy. Because you got to think about it. It's the first ministry ever, right? It's the first ministry ever. And it's the most important
that's good.
ministry that you're ever going to have, right? Even after your kids move, you're not a parent anymore, your spouse becomes, no matter what, your spouse comes before your kids. Some people are like, what you mean, man? My kid. listen, your spouse comes before my kids. My kids run off, I'd be like, all right, peace. I make some more, y'all. My wife comes first. My wife comes first. I love my kids, but listen, my wife comes first, right? More than my job,
Always.
my wife comes first. Before church, the building, my wife comes first. The only person that my wife doesn't come in front of is Christ. He is number one. But on this physical earth, my wife is the most important person that I do life with.
Amen.
And that's what marriage does, man. It sanctifies you when you do it the right way, man. It teaches you how to be holy. Because if you could treat this person that you have to deal with every day, if you could treat her right, if you can love her as you love yourself, then you can love your neighbor as you love yourself. And it just trickles down to every other relationship that you're going to have. You can die to self and serve this woman that y'all probably are polar opposites of. You know, me and my wife, man, we are polar opposite. I like sports. My wife don't like sports. I like video games. My wife don't like video games. I like action movies and comedy. My wife likes scary and depressing movies is what I call them. Like my wife can watch The Color Purple like every day, and I'm like ready to.
Color Purple is a good
It's
movie
a
though.
good movie, but fam, I don't like my wife. She has a very unique taste of movies. The thing that we love together is Marvel. We're Marvel people. We love Marvel movies, and we bond over movies. There are a lot of movies that we like, but we're different, man. My wife likes super spicy food. I don't. Right? We're different, but God seemed fit to put us together. And yeah, it's teaching me to die to myself so that I can serve her. Could you imagine if
Amen.
God gave me a person that we liked all of the same things? There's no challenge in that. There's like no sanctification because I know as soon as I ask the question, they're gonna agree with me. So it's like, what you want for dinner? Like, you want some pizza or some wings, or you gonna watch the game too? It's like no challenge. Like we do everything the same. But 9 times out of 10, any couple that you see that's been married, they're different. They're different, man. All the way down
And
to the complexion
that's
of their
such a
skin, they
there
different.
that's a great word, man. Because like I used to think that was unique. I used to think, especially with me and my wife, because we have a lot of differences too, down to entertainment choices, how we pray, just what we spend our time doing. But it's like I wouldn't have it any other way. Especially the more I've gotten to know Mary, and I'm like, I love our differences. But I noticed I used to think like we were unique among couples until I started really looking at couples like they're like really good couples have really distinct differences. You know, and I used to think it was something cute until I heard like a pastor, uh, Joyce Meyer. She said that because she always highlights the differences between her and her husband, and she was like, "My husband is so much different than I am," and it was like God, like it's like God orchestrated like that so we could like sharpen each other. You know, like he likes sports, I don't. He likes this, and not even the superficial stuff, but temperament. You know, you learn how to deal with a different temperament. Like Marianne is a problem solver. She is someone who is like she if she sees 100 tasks in front of her, she will attack one at a time and kill it. If I see 100 tasks in front of me, it's like, man, let's go lay down and let's ignore them, and then maybe God will solve them. But
That's
but
funny.
but what God was teaching me was that you need to learn how, and Marianne will say the opposite. God was teaching me that you need to learn how to attack things one thing at a time. And Marianne will say, Ray, I needed to learn how to relax a little bit and not be so gung ho. So it's like God uses us to sharpen each other, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So I wanna just share before we wrap up, and I wanna share a couple things, right? I
Yeah.
wanna just quickly talk about this 10 essentials to Christian premarital counseling topics that need to be discussed, right? Anybody who's thinking about being married, you're engaged, you're like, I need to do this premarital counseling thing, right? What are the things I'm gonna talk about? I'm gonna name off about 10. And these are things that
Fact.
you guys can look up, but these are probably the most important things, right? And I'm gonna just list them. I'm gonna just read them really quick because our time is running. But number one is, this is probably the first conversation, first thing is your spiritual foundation, right? Is there? Are you a believer? Are they a believer? What's that gonna look like, right? Spiritual foundation. You need to know, right? Family origins. Talk about the family backgrounds, man. Like even talking about like disabilities, even talking about
Mm.
addictions, drug abuse. Like, are these things? Some of these things could be, what's the word? Hereditary. Is that the
Mm.
what's the word when you
Yeah,
pass it
that's the
on?
word. That's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
word.
So, you want to talk about those things, family origins, man. How's your family? Just in different things. Just talk about it. Get to know the family, meet them, hang out with them, see what they're about, all that type of stuff. Ask them about their childhood, all that. Get Talk about that stuff. Even run a background check if you can. If you got some friends, if not, let me know. I got some people in the higher places. I can find out some stuff. Um, the meaning of marriage, right? I think this is a big one. Why are you getting married, right? What does this marriage
Mm.
represent to you? Talk about the meaning of marriage. What are we trying? What are we doing when we come together? Why is this meaningful? Why do we need to get married? You know what I'm saying? That's like a hot topic as well. So yeah, talk about that. A spirit intimacy, right? Knowing Jesus and what marriage is all about is a critical starting point, right? Freely share your experience of Christ with your partner. Talk about how God is, what He's doing in your life, man. I read the Bible today, man. Is God revealed this to me? Blah blah blah. Like, do that stuff, right? Talk about your spiritual intimacy with your spouse. And then this is a big one: communication. How to communicate,
Mm.
the importance of communicating, when to communicate, all the things that goes into communication. You talk about that, why it's important. Um, and then conflicts, how to resolve your conflicts. It's important. You can't just shut down and never talk about it and sweep it under the rug. I'm telling you, that rug is going to eventually pile up. It's going to have a big old knot under it. It's going to be so much stuff under that rug. It's going to start having lumps. And then you're going to trip and fall. And then that rug is going to come unmoved. And all this stuff that y'all was sweeping under there, y'all going to have to deal with it again. Because now the rug is moved.
Mm.
And all that stuff is back
That's good.
exposed. It's back out. So learn how to deal with conflict, right? And then your view of money is a big one because I forgot the percentage of people that do get divorced. I think it was like 55% of the people that do get divorced, they get divorced for financial reasons. So talk about money, your
Mm.
view of money, spending habits, all of that. Like, talk about that stuff. And then your future, right? Both of you have a vision of your life and how you want your life to be. Talk about that. Why did God bring us together? Right? What do you
Mm.
want to do in with your future in the next 5 years? Where do you see yourself? This is why I see myself. Is that going to be,
What's the ministry God has given us?
right?
You know, as a couple, what do you believe God wants us to do together that we couldn't have done apart?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
That's good.
I think the two are separate. So like your future, what you want to do, kind of in like a career aspect and stuff like that. The mission and the
Gotcha.
service together. That
Gotcha.
was my last one. But before I get to that one, it's let's talk about physical intimacy, sexual history. I gotta start talking about this stuff. We live in it's 2023. Everybody and their mama out here having sex. Mama's mamas is having sex. Like, y'all gotta have these real conversations about sex and talk about your history. What's your body count? You know what I'm saying? You know, should
Hey.
we go get some tests together? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, just be real. Like, you gotta talk about that stuff. So, and then as you just said, lastly, your mission and your service together. Like, from the beginning, God brought Adam and Eve together. There was an outward mission. Like, He told Adam what he needed to do, and then Eve was to come alongside of him and help him to do those things. Right? That was God's mission for them. I don't know what God's mission is for you, right? It could be, man, he called your husband he called you to be a pastor. Man, your wife is gonna have to serve alongside of you in that ministry. Like those are big shoes. You know what I'm saying? That's a big thing. So y'all need to talk about what is God doing, what mission does he have you on, and how do you guys do that together? It's a real thing. So yeah, man. Those are 10 things that you should be talking about. There's probably some more that you can add to the list. But I would say start with those 10, and then I'll end with this. As Christians, we need to be proactive in talking about all these things that I just named off. Not just in premarital counseling, but just in our day-to-day lives for all of us who are married already. Like, we need to be talking about these things continuously. Because like I said earlier, seasons in your life change, right? People go through things. Men go through things, right? Even physically, man. Like, I got a little gut. I'm trying to get rid of this gut, right? It's affecting me. I need to get rid of this thing, right? Go through stuff, right? Mentally, you go through stuff. But continue to talk about that stuff. And then keep Christ at the center of everything in your life, personally and in your marriage. Keep him the glue that sticks it all together. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 5 and 6, it says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not onto your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll direct your path. He's going to direct your path in your marriage. He's going to direct your path in how you communicate, how you handle situations, how you budget, how you handle your money. Keep Christ the center, right? And trust in God to handle it, man, and lean on his word. And he's gonna when you do that, you're gonna have a foundation that can't be broken, can't be shaken. You're gonna go through some stuff. Trials and tribulations gonna come. But when you have that solid foundation, man, ain't nothing knocking that loose. And that's all. That's all I would say.
And even into the couple, I'll say real quick, if you are considering getting married and you're getting serious, and maybe marriage counseling may seem a little bit daunting right now, I would encourage you, just if there's a couple you admire in your church or in your circle, and they've been together for a good minute, and you can kind of see they have a healthy relationship, maybe take them out to dinner, and maybe just say, me and my girlfriend, me and my fiance, we want to sit with you guys, and we want to. That could be a good step, because sometimes I don't know about this marriage counseling, but good marriage counseling ain't nothing but just somebody that knows a little bit more than you taking you by the hand and just walking with you. And so I would encourage you, find a couple that you really admire and sit across from them and like break bread and ask questions. Ask them how they navigate this. Ask them how they navigate that, because they may have some wisdom that you don't. Yeah. When me and Marianne get pregnant, I'm taking Darry and his wife out, and we're gonna ask them questions from top to bottom on how to do everything.
As long as the butter chicken is present, I'm there.
The food will be free, but we're gonna ask y'all about thousands of dollars worth of advice on child rearing. So get ready for that. We will have butter chicken things. My mother-in-law can cook some fire. She can cook some fire butter chicken.
Butter chicken is there. I'm there, bro. I am there. But yeah, man. I'm not an expert. I'm not a marriage counselor. Like, I don't have a degree or anything. What I do have is some experience. I got some things that I learned from some people. And me and my wife been married going on 11 years in May. It will be 11 years, been together going on 19 years. 19 years of being together. So I know a little bit about some stuff. But yeah.
And you look so young. You look so young too.
Thank you. Hey, my marriage ain't perfect. We still getting it together. We still learning and we still growing. It's all by the grace of God. But yeah. So, man, this has been fun. Thank y'all for joining us. Shout outs to all the people who watch this on YouTube. Shout outs to all the people that's listening to this on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, whatever you listening Thank you for joining us. Next week, we're going to be talking about evangelism. Should we do it only on the street corner? Or should we be doing it the subtle approach, like building relationships? We're going to talk about it next week here on The Real Perspective. Thank y'all again. It's been one. My name is Darry. My co-host Ray. Until next week, I'll let y'all. Peace.